Kieron meets Jan and falls hopelessly in love. But soon she's sent away, and Kieron spirals into chaos as he tries to keep the farm alive. Chapter 17. Caught in the Act. The only thing on my mind that day was getting to the Rio on time to meet my girlfriend. I'd first caught a glimpse of Jan outside the cafe one day, as I sat astride my red, poncy little Honda 65, with its silver stripes and STD transfers that made it resemble a Christmas tree with me like the fairy on top. But I think she liked the hair. Apparently, she fell off her chair trying to get a better look. Man, oh man, was she a beauty. I was in love. The fishing trip I'd been heading for became secondary, and before long she sat on the pillion as we charged off to the swimming pool. My life took one hell of a turn. I lost weight, developed permanent rings under my eyes, and ignored just about everything else. It pains me to the extreme to remember it all, but it set me on a course that perhaps typifies the way my life progressed. A year we courted before this blonde of mine was hastily repatriated to England. Too serious, her parents said. They made the wrong decision, as will become evident in chapter 20 of these stories. But I had work to do, so life at the farm continued. Managing Ted's dairy farm was pretty straightforward. Apart from being the owner's son, looking important and feigning extreme knowledge, I used to deliver 10 or so churns of milk to town in the Chev at sunrise. One of my workers was named Bester. He was about 4'11" and built like a Sherman tank, a tough individual whose verbal repertoire extended to the odd grunt. He could hand milk a cow in 5 minutes, his hands a blur as the milk squirted into the bucket. One morning, I returned to the farm from town to find him and the other workers lolling about ready to unload the truck. As usual, they were playing cards. So many times I'd wondered what game they were playing until that very day when I stood over them and watched. It would have been impolite to ask. It seemed a secret, the process meticulous. The dealer shuffles the deck. The man to his right painstakingly cuts the pack, and the whole deck is dealt out evenly. Passively, the group sits in a circle, staring at their cards. Then, quite suddenly, Bester cheers madly, money exchanges hands, and the whole process is repeated. For months, the purpose of this charade had evaded me. Until then, when I spotted the subtlety of it all, the first player to have a fly land on his cards is the winner. On another occasion, Bester asked for a lift to his village to check on his wife, who was heavily pregnant. I sat his tiny frame in the passenger seat. "Where is your village, Bester?" "Near," he said, pointing down the dirt track leading nowhere I knew of. I watched as he started rolling a cigarette in newspaper. They all smoked like troopers using locally grown tobacco. "Well, how far exactly?" He had no real appreciation for distance. These fellows walked everywhere and rarely travelled in cars. He pondered for some time. "How far, Bester?" "2 cigarettes," he replied, indicating his roll-up. Anyway, that day they were playing their card game. I ordered them to work and lined up my Chev to the unloading bay where Bester was facing away. I didn't see him as I reversed. It was difficult enough to maneuver as the engine room was nearby. Accidentally, the back of the truck whacked Bester on the backside. He turned and glared at me. I didn't like his threatening look one bit and got out to see if he was okay. All of a sudden, he rushed at me, and his hard, ball-bearing frame almost winded me. I grabbed him around the waist and hoisted him up, trying to fend him off. But being so tiny, he turned upside down and grabbed my ankles. In a tight headlock, his legs scissored my neck, and my face got buried in his backside. At that moment, he let rip the most vicious fart. I gasped, dropped him, and recoiled. He landed bang on his head and lay there laughing until he cried. The rest of the workers just doubled up with mirth. Surprisingly enough, I learned a lot about animal husbandry, but was too young and unsupervised to be of any real use. Anyway, something else was ruling my head, and it was located somewhere about halfway down my body. Her name was Fanny, a name that had the town giggling. She was a blonde Greek with the sultry demeanor of a star actress. I had no idea she was forbidden fruit, promised to another. But as they say, a teenage giggling pin has no conscience. Note the term giggling pin was a term my mother invented for one's willy or wiener, or whatever your own colloquialism is. Fanny lived with her parents on a tobacco farm 30 miles the other side of Broken Hill. This was not a problem when she was at the convent during school term, as she lived with friends of my parents. Holidays were the big challenge. Accessibility was a dangerous matter. So we had a special arrangement. It was innocent, really. At night, I was permitted to drive to her farm and hide the Chev. I would stalk through the bush to the back of her house and squat behind the Rhodesian boiler, a local wood-fired hot water system made from a 45-gallon drum. If her window was open, the coast was clear, and I was invited in to share in the honest business of biological study. Often, I waited like a randy canine for hours and slunk away when the window stayed firmly shut. The nights I did gain entry always lasted till close to dawn, when I would rush off in time to milk the cows. The bags under my eyes just never went away. That night the window was invitingly ajar. It was the last night of her school holidays, and the moussaka was about to hit the fan. Anxious to make a good night of it, we made our usual nest on the concrete floor of her room and lit a candle. We had to be dead quiet as her parents' room was right next door. A mere 3 inches of concrete divided us from certain death. The radio was permitted to burble quietly, just as well when I was burbling. It may have been an omen, but I distinctly recall a Bee Gees song called "Saved by the Bell" being played. That fateful night, I was wearing nothing but a tight pair of swimming trunks and a baggy jumper. It was a night to remember, the first time I fell asleep. You know how you wake up sometimes and smile, stretch languidly and listen to the early morning chirp of birds and the lazy movement of a family waking to prepare for the day. Slow realization dawned on me. This was not my family. Breathless, I strode to the window and put my head out. All clear. Out goes one leg, then the other. I thrust my hips forward in preparation to drop to the ground. I had the waning remnants of an Irish toothache, accentuated by my position. I gawked in terror to my left. An unshaven face that resembled Anthony Quinn after a night on the Terps is witnessing my departure. Behind me, the cupboard door slammed as Fanny hid to the thumping of a 3-ton mother at the locked bedroom door. Trapped I was, but leaped headlong into the garden and ricocheted off the Rhodesian boiler. I stubbed my toe on a fallen log and hopped desperately away. I turned to see the father trying to get out of his own window. It spurred me on. "What you do, my daughter?" The unshaven head screamed at my retreating form. I bolted barefoot down the dirt driveway with untamed, unfed German shepherds in chase. Behind them, stark naked, Zorba the Greek shook his fist in anger. I waited for the shot, but just managed to leap the fence to the blissful sight of my hidden Chev. I caught sight of Fanny a month or so later outside our favorite haunt, the Rio Café. Her parents walked on each side of her like bodyguards. I, like a camera-shy criminal, just managed to sneak away before recognition caused an untimely death. Soon after, Fanny was married off in a fanfare of Greek tradition. Amid this chaos, a letter arrived. "I'm coming home. I'm a new man, and I have a woman. By the way, she's pregnant." Big brother Mike was returning. His wife-to-be was rising star in the world of modeling, a veritable beauty. All was forgiven. The devil in him had fled. A passing phase, he said. "We all go through it," he went on. "Used to be a bit of a lad," he chortled. Ted thought peace had found Michael at last. They were married at a curious little mission run by a clutch of modern brothers of the Franciscan order. They were a mendicant order reputedly founded by Francis of Assisi. These particular chaps seemed to be on the fringes of the normal constraints of apostolic poverty and shared their reverence with spirits other than Jesus, Mary, and the Holy Ghost. Mike got a job as manager at a car yard, a job that ended after he was spotted in the back of a Pontiac Parisienne GTO in flagrante delicto with the car yard owner's wife. But right away, he landed a job on the mines up north, away from anyone he knew at all. Off he went with his pregnant wife. There was no proper accommodation at Ascari Farm. I commuted from the army camp every day at 3 a.m. and soon got sick of the whole process. If the truth be known, the place was run by a very capable black supervisor named Shadrach. For those interested in an unusual name for their children, Shadrach is a biblical variant for command of Aku, which is kind of meaningless, really. He'd been there for years and knew the ropes. I seemed to be there on hold, waiting for something to happen, getting a suntan, being a convenient channel of communication for Ted, who was becoming the ultimate gentleman farmer. To make things a bit easier, he leased another farm a bit closer to the dairy farm, and that became my new lodgings. I was not alone. My brother Sean moved in with me, and we converted one room into a kind of bedsit that had a vague similarity to our previous shack. But we had a servant named Smart, who attended to our every need.